Breaking. What you are about to see is not being covered the way it should be. While the world's cameras are pointed elsewhere, an entire nation is being systematically dismantled, not with a single decisive battle, but with a strategy so precise, so patient, and so brutal that most governments are only now beginning to understand what is happening. Burkina Faso, West Africa, right now. A crisis that has crossed every red line and keeps going. Welcome to TARORE Digital Universe, the channel that reports what mainstream media buries. If you are new here, subscribe right now and hit that bell icon so you never miss a report like this. Like this video, share it, and drop your location in the comments. We want to know who is watching and where this reaches. Stay with us. Every second of this report matters. Breaking update. Let us go straight to the facts, because the facts alone are staggering. On May 11th, 2025, motorcycle riding fighters linked to Jama'at Nusrat al-Islam wal-Muslimin, known as JNIM, swept into Djibo, the provincial capital of Soum province in northern Burkina Faso, a city of 300,000 people, many of them internally displaced civilians who had already fled violence elsewhere. JNIM did not just attack and withdraw, they seized the military camp. They looted weapons, including pickup trucks mounted with heavy machine guns. At least 100 people were killed, civilians, soldiers, and members of the state-backed militia. But that is not the end of the alert. The very next day, May 12th, JNIM struck again. This time in the east of the country, briefly seizing the town of Deapaga, they set governmental infrastructure ablaze. And then, in a move that shocked analysts, they stayed for 2 full days. That is not guerrilla warfare. That is occupation. That is a signal. Now, let us put this in rapid sequence because Djibo and Deapaga did not happen in isolation. Here is the confirmed timeline of what JNIM has done in the 12 months leading up to this moment. March 28, 2025, over 200 heavily armed JNIM fighters attacked the town of Deapaga in the Tapoa region. The military base was nearly encircled. More than 60 soldiers and militia members were killed. Civilians were also executed. The death toll exceeded 90. April 4th, 2025. In Sindorla, in the Kenadougou region, JNIM fighters launched a brutal assault on a defense forces post. Over 25 soldiers were killed. The camp was looted and set on fire. Armored vehicles, ammunition, and motorcycles were taken. The soldiers' bodies were left desecrated. July 28, 2025, approximately 100 heavily armed militants stormed a military base in Dargo, Bulsa province in the north. Around 50 soldiers were killed. The base was looted and burned. The military government issued no official statement. September 17, 2025. Before dawn, between 5 and 7 a.m., JNIM carried out a coordinated assault on multiple Burkinabe Defense Force positions simultaneously in Djibo. Multiple command nodes hit in the same 2-hour window. We are not talking about isolated incidents. We are talking about a sustained, coordinated, escalating military campaign, carried out across multiple regions at an increasing pace with increasing lethality. And as of May 6, 2026, just days ago, JNIM struck again in the Dedougou region of the Bouclé du Mouhoun. Footage confirmed, soldiers' bodies visible. The operational tempo is not slowing down. It is accelerating. Stay right there, because you need to understand why this is happening and the history behind it. To understand how Burkina Faso got here, you have to go back, not years, but decades. Since gaining independence from France in 1960, Burkina Faso has been defined by coups, single-party rule, and fragile governance. Public trust in institutions has been eroded for generations. Rural communities, especially in the north and east, have historically been left without services, without protection, without representation. The jihadist insurgency did not appear from nowhere. It grew from that vacuum. JNIM, which is an Al-Qaeda affiliate, began operations in Burkina Faso in 2015. They moved into communities that the government had abandoned. They offered protection. They offered food. They offered a sense of order on their own violent terms. By 2022, analysts estimated that armed groups controlled significant portions of Burkina Faso's territory. Then came the coup. In September 2022, Captain Ibrahim Traoré seized power. He was 34 years old. He was passionate. He was Pan-Africanist. He was popular. And he made a bold promise. He would defeat the insurgency within months. He did not. And the decisions he made next made everything worse. Traoré's first major security decision was to expel France's counterterrorism force, Operation Barkhane, which had been operating in the Sahel. He rejected Western security partnerships. He turned instead to Russia's Wagner Group, which has since been rebranded as Africa Corps. Approximately 100 Russian security personnel deployed to Burkina Faso, primarily to protect Traoré himself and to generate propaganda. Simultaneously, Traoré launched a mass recruitment drive, enrolling over 100,000 civilian auxiliaries into a force called the Volunteers for the Defense of the Homeland, or VDP. These volunteers received 2 to 3 weeks of training before being deployed to front lines against a seasoned, battle-hardened insurgency. Here is what happened next. Instead of defeating JNIM, this strategy fed it. The VDP, drawn heavily from sedentary farming communities, carried out ethnic violence, particularly targeting the Fulani minority, who were broadly perceived as sympathetic to jihadists. Communities that had been neutral were pushed toward JNIM through state-sanctioned brutality. JNIM positioned itself as avenger and protector of attacked communities. Recruitment surged. By the time of our latest confirmed data, 2025, analysts estimate JNIM and the rival Islamic State Sahel province control as much as 60% of Burkina Faso's territory. The government, based in Ouagadougou, is increasingly isolated in its own capital. Schools, hospitals, and courts in northern and eastern regions have been shut down. Rural communities now rely on insurgent groups for food, medicine, and protection. This is not just a security crisis. This is a state that is losing the most fundamental contest, the contest for legitimacy. And that is where the real danger lies. Coming up, we identify exactly who the key players are in this escalating crisis. Do not go anywhere. Alert. Now, let us go deeper. Because behind every crisis of this scale, there are specific actors, specific decisions, and specific interests. Here are the key players you need to know. Player 1. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso's junta leader. Age 37. One of the world's youngest heads of state. Traoré seized power in October 2022 in the second coup of that year alone, ousting the previous junta leader who had himself taken power just 8 months earlier. Traoré has styled himself as a Pan-Africanist revolutionary in the tradition of Thomas Sankara, the beloved Burkinabe leader assassinated in 1987. He speaks the language of black sovereignty, self-reliance, and liberation from Western imperialism. That message resonates deeply, both within Burkina Faso and across the continent. But the security reality under Traoré's watch is catastrophic. His regime has overseen the deaths of civilians at record levels every year since he took power. 2025 is on pace to nearly match 2024's total of 980 civilians killed in operations directly involving state forces, many in large-scale massacres that Human Rights Watch has documented as war crimes. Opposition politicians are jailed or conscripted to the front lines. Journalists are expelled or forced into exile. A judge who investigated corruption allegations was arrested and deployed to fight jihadists. Civil society is suspended. Free speech is criminalized. On January 6, 2026, the government began airing nightly televised confessions, military officers accused of plotting a coup forced to humiliate themselves on state television. In May 2025, Traoré traveled to Moscow and met personally with Vladimir Putin at the Kremlin. Russia pledged additional arms and training. In April 2025, Russia also pledged support for a new alliance of Sahel states' regional military force. The junta controls Ouagadougou, but the evidence suggests it controls little else with confidence. Player 2, JNIM, Jama'at Nusrat al-Islam wal-Muslimin. JNIM is an Al-Qaeda affiliate, formed in 2017 through the merger of several Sahel jihadist factions. It operates across Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, but has specifically identified Burkina Faso as what intelligence analysts describe as the weak link in the Sahel chain. Its two primary operational factions in Burkina Faso are Kataba Makina and Kataba Hanifa. It has a media arm, Minbar al-Bayan, producing multi-language propaganda in Bambara, French, and other regional languages, targeting communities, VDP members, youth, and even truck drivers. JNIM has employed siege tactics against towns like Djibo for years, cutting off food and medical supplies, slowly starving communities into submission. But the May 2025 attacks represent a doctrinal shift. JNIM is no longer just besieging and raiding, it is seizing and holding. The prolonged two-day occupation of Diapaga was unprecedented in the group's operational history. They posed for photos at the central roundabout. They filmed themselves inside government buildings. The propaganda value was incalculable and deliberate. Player 3, Russia, Africa Corps. Wagner Group rebranded. Africa Corps, the successor entity, has approximately 100 personnel deployed in Burkina Faso. Their primary stated mission: train Burkinabe forces and protect Traore personally. But analysts note that in neighboring Mali, Russian personnel have directly participated in combat operations alongside the Malian military. The question of whether Africa Corps is deployed in a similar frontline capacity in Burkina Faso remains open, but the trajectory is clear. Russia's footprint in the Sahel is deepening. Player 4, the Fulani communities, caught in the middle. This player is often invisible in international coverage. The Fulani are a predominantly pastoral minority group spread across the Sahel. Both JNIM and state forces have targeted them. JNIM for recruitment and coercion, state forces and VDP militias for suspected collaboration with insurgents. In March 2025, over 130 Fulani civilians were summarily killed in the Boucle de Mouhoun region by state-linked forces. That's documented by Human Rights Watch as a massacre. This ethnic violence cycle is now self-sustaining. It is JNIM's most powerful recruitment tool and the junta's greatest strategic failure. Up next, how the world has responded. Stay tuned. More details as they develop. Developing now. While the battles rage in Burkina Faso's north and east, the diplomatic and institutional response has been fragmented, delayed, and, in several critical cases, entirely absent. Let us start with ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States. Burkina Faso, along with Mali and Niger, officially withdrew from ECOWAS in early 2025. The three military-led governments formed their own bloc, the Alliance of Sahel States, rejecting ECOWAS pressure for democratic transitions and elections. This withdrawal is not a symbolic gesture. It has materially reduced regional security coordination. Cross-border intelligence sharing has declined. Joint operations are now effectively impossible. And JNIM, which operates seamlessly across all three countries, has exploited every gap. The United States has not stayed silent. In April 2025, General Michael Langley, commander of U.S. Africa Command, testified before the Senate, accusing the Burkina Faso junta of using the country's gold revenues to protect itself rather than fund security operations. The allegation, delivered in open Senate testimony, triggered furious condemnation from Traore's supporters across social media. The junta has rejected all such criticism as Western interference and imperialist narrative. Human Rights Watch published a landmark report on May 12, 2025, documenting an army-directed massacre of over 100 Fulani civilians in western Burkina Faso, a war crime under international law. The junta called it a smear campaign. No accountability followed. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs has recorded a worsening humanitarian situation, with an estimated 2 million internally displaced people inside Burkina Faso. Supply routes to northern cities are besieged. In Djibo alone, JNIM's years-long economic blockade has strangled food and medicine access to 300,000 residents. Humanitarian organizations attempting to resupply by air have been targeted. In November 2025, JNIM deployed an unmanned aerial vehicle against an aid distribution point in Pama, signaling a dangerous new tactical escalation for humanitarian operations. Expert voices are issuing stark warnings. Will Brown, Senior Policy Fellow for Africa at the European Council on Foreign Relations, described the trajectory as leading toward, and we quote carefully here, a scenario in which the government becomes progressively confined to its capital, surrounded by insurgent-controlled territory. Brown also noted that Burkina Faso's government security forces are struggling to hold ground beyond Ouagadougou, with persistently low morale and an insurgency equipped with looted military hardware. The assessment from the Soufan Center is equally stark. The current pace of JNIM's operations is exceeding the capacity of junta-led governments to respond. Meanwhile, Russia has moved in the opposite direction, deepening rather than withdrawing. At a May 10, 2025 meeting in the Kremlin, Putin personally pledged weapons and training to Traore. In April 2025, Russia committed to supporting a new alliance of Sahel states' regional force, a bloc explicitly designed to replace Western and ECOWAS security architecture with a Russia-backed alternative. The reaction from the African continent itself is divided. Pan-Africanist circles have largely defended Traore, framing him as a leader resisting neo-colonial interference. Critics and human rights organizations point to the collapse of civilian protections under his rule. The debate is fierce, deeply felt, and unresolved. What is not debated is this. On the ground, the security situation has deteriorated every single year since 2022. The attacks are bigger. The territory under government control is smaller. The civilian death toll keeps rising. We'll keep watching. We'll keep reporting. Stay with us. Breaking analysis. What we have covered so far is what happened. Now, let us talk about why it is working. JNIM is not fighting a conventional war. It is not trying to defeat the Burkina Faso military in a single decisive engagement. That is not the strategy. The strategy is systemic overload, and it has three interlocking components. Component 1, simultaneous multi-region pressure. In conventional counterinsurgency, security forces respond sequentially. A threat emerges. Forces are dispatched. The situation is addressed. Forces return to readiness. The system recovers. JNIM has deliberately broken that sequence. By launching coordinated operations across separate regions, the north, the east, the west, simultaneously, JNIM forces the Burkina Faso security apparatus to respond in multiple directions at once. Resources that would otherwise concentrate force at a single decisive point are instead scattered across urgent competing demands. The result is not defeat in any single location. It is degraded effectiveness everywhere. Reinforcements arrive late. Situations develop further before containment. Each incomplete response leaves behind a residual vulnerability that the next attack exploits. Component 2, the siege economy. JNIM has spent years constructing what analysts describe as an economic blockade strategy. Towns like Djibo have been under effective commercial siege. JNIM controls surrounding roads and rural territory, choking supply lines. This is not just about starving populations. It is about destroying the government's ability to claim it provides for its citizens. When people in Djibo can only get food because JNIM allows it, or withholds it, the political implication is catastrophic. The state's most basic social contract, protection and provision, is being outsourced to the insurgency. In November 2025, JNIM's spokesperson issued explicit statements designating fuel truck drivers as legitimate military targets. This doctrinal escalation, openly threatening civilian logistics workers, represents an attempt to collapse the economy of contested areas entirely. Component 3, the recruitment machine powered by state violence. This is the most vicious cycle in the entire crisis, and the most consequential. Every time VDP militias carry out ethnic massacres of Fulani communities, they hand JNIM a recruitment advertisement. JNIM has used exactly this dynamic, presenting itself as defender of victimized communities, to expand its membership and deepen its local intelligence networks. The junta's counterinsurgency strategy is, in documented and measurable terms, generating the insurgency it claims to be defeating. What makes this especially dangerous is the propaganda dimension. JNIM's media arm, Minbar al-Bayan, is producing sophisticated multi-language content in Bambara, French, and local dialects, specifically designed to exploit each cycle of state violence. Every massacre, every forced conscription, every arrested journalist becomes content that JNIM distributes across the Sahel and beyond. Meanwhile, the junta's information environment has become entirely closed. International broadcasters, including Voice of America, have been suspended. Local journalists operate under threat of arrest, exile, or forced deployment to the front. The result is a vacuum of credible information that pro-junta propaganda and Russian-backed disinformation has rushed to fill. We are watching in real time the collapse of state legitimacy, not through military defeat, but through the erosion of the state's core functions: protection, provision, and truth. One final analytical point before we turn to the scenarios ahead. The JNIM ISWAP dynamic, the relationship between the Al-Qaeda affiliate and the rival Islamic State faction, is shifting. In eastern Burkina Faso, the two groups are clashing. That competition could, theoretically, create pressure on JNIM, but it could also escalate violence further, as both groups compete to demonstrate capability and attract recruits. There is no clean outcome in a rivalry between two jihadist factions on Burkinabe soil. More details as they develop. Coming up, the scenarios that determine everything. Alert. Based on everything we have reported tonight, here are the three scenarios that intelligence analysts and geopolitical researchers are now watching most closely. Scenario 1. Manage fragmentation, the best case. In this scenario, the junta survives, but in a severely diminished form. Ouagadougou and a small cluster of major towns remain under government control, sustained by Russian support, VDP deployments, and international humanitarian corridors. JNIM consolidates control over rural north and east, but does not attempt to seize the capital. A de facto partition emerges, not declared, not acknowledged, but functionally real. Africa Corps entrenches as the protection force for the government enclave. The population suffers. The crisis becomes chronic. This is sometimes called the Mogadishu scenario. A government nominally in power, actually besieged in its own capital. Scenario 2. Cascading regional contagion, the most likely. In this scenario, JNIM uses Burkina Faso as a base of operations to accelerate its southward expansion into coastal West Africa. This is already happening. JNIM has already conducted major operations in Benin, killing at least 54 Beninese soldiers in a coordinated double attack on April 17, 2025. Togo is also experiencing JNIM incursions. Ghana, Ivory Coast, and Senegal are watching developments with increasing alarm. The entire architecture of coastal West Africa's relative stability, built over decades, is being tested by a threat that respects no border. JNIM does not need to conquer Burkina Faso to use it. It already does. Scenario 3. Junta collapse, the severe case. In this scenario, the combination of military pressure, economic deterioration, internal dissent, including coup attempts, one of which Traore claims to have foiled in early 2026, and the complete collapse of state services beyond the capital triggers a political breaking point. Either Traore is removed by elements within the military, or the government loses its ability to function even in Ouagadougou. In this scenario, the power vacuum becomes total, and Burkina Faso becomes a failed state in the fullest sense, with no central authority capable of negotiating, governing, or protecting any of its people. None of these scenarios ends well for the 22 million people of Burkina Faso. The only question is the degree of suffering. What would change these trajectories? Three things are consistently identified by analysts. First, an end to the ethnic violence cycle, which requires the junta to fundamentally restructure its counterinsurgency approach and stop using the VDP as a communal militia. Second, genuine diplomatic engagement with communities currently aligned with or neutral toward JNIM, something Traore has explicitly rejected, calling negotiation a surrender. Third, regional coordination, which requires Burkina Faso's reintegration into multilateral security frameworks, something the junta's current alignment with Russia and the AES trajectory makes extremely unlikely. The variables are not hidden. The solutions, on paper, are identifiable. The barrier is political will, from Traore, from regional partners, from international actors who have largely looked away from a crisis of enormous proportions. And this is exactly where you, watching right now, have a role. Demanding attention for crises the mainstream ignores is not just awareness, it is accountability. More details as they develop. Do not go anywhere. Final report tonight. Let us be absolutely clear about what you have just witnessed in this report. Burkina Faso is not experiencing random violence. It is experiencing a deliberate, calibrated, multi-layered strategy designed to exhaust a government and fill the resulting vacuum with jihadist governance. JNIM has a media arm, a siege doctrine, a recruitment machine, and a regional expansion plan. It is, by every available metric, executing that plan successfully. The government of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, whatever one thinks of his politics, his anti-colonial rhetoric, or his personal courage, is, by every available metric, losing the security contest that defines the future of his country. His counterinsurgency strategy is generating the enemy it claims to defeat. His political repression is eliminating the voices that might offer alternative solutions. His international alignment with Russia has deepened dependence on an actor whose core interest is influence, not Burkinabe stability. And the 22 million people of Burkina Faso, including over 2 million internally displaced, are paying the price. This story matters because the Sahel does not stay in the Sahel. What begins in Burkina Faso reaches Benin, Togo, Ghana, and beyond. The coastline of West Africa is the next front. The world needs to pay attention now. This has been TARORE Digital Universe, the channel that brings you what mainstream media won't cover. The stories of Black civilization, Black history, Black struggle, and Black resilience, told with depth, with rigor, and with respect. Subscribe now and press the bell icon. Never miss a report like this. Like this video if it gave you information you didn't have before. Share it, because this story deserves a larger audience. Drop your location in the comments. Where in the world are you watching from? Tell us, what should Traore do? What would you do? We read every comment. We'll keep watching. We'll keep reporting. We will be back. Stay tuned.